Great. So welcome to this session as part of BAPT's 34th annual conference, unbelievably. I'm Jerry Gilpin. I'm a member of the current BAPT board, and it's a joy for me to be welcoming Elizabeth and Katherine Hirsh to lead us for the next hour here. Very well-known authors. I'm sure many of you have got sitting on your shelves, Type and Teams, or Type and Decision Making, or both. In my case, and many other things as well, and both very experienced consultants, practitioners, teachers of type. So it's lovely to have them with us this afternoon. One thing we spoke about at the AGM of the BAPT yesterday was how in a fractured post-pandemic world, it is difficult to build a sense of connection, and how we do that together. So it's lovely to have this session about using values to build belonging together. So I'm going to hand over to Katherine and Elizabeth now, and I will share their slides on the screen.
Thank you very much, Jerry, and welcome everyone. I see quite a few people I know. Yes, hi Graham. Hi Yvonne. And some people who I'm looking forward to getting to know.
Lovely.
So as Jerry said, our topic today, our session, is called Building Belonging by Being True to Your Values. And for those of you who don't know, Elizabeth and I are sisters. People often ask that, and actually people often confuse us, so we won't be offended. That's happened plenty of times. And we really wanted to be part of this year's conference and are looking forward to the energy that Angelina, Gareth, and Rob kicked us off with, building through the day. So thank you all for being here.
And I'm Elizabeth.
Next slide, please. Oh, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say hello. I'm Elizabeth Hirsh, Katherine's sister, and you also may know our mother, Sandra Hirsh, also an author, kind of an MBTI pioneer as well. So those of you who may know her, I just thought I'd mention her as well. So go ahead, Katherine.
So we thought one of the connections between type and belonging was that type gives people the sense that they are different rather than broken. And I know in my own personal journey, learning about type early on was something that really helped me to see myself as someone who had special gifts rather than someone who was wrong or bad. So we put together a few statements about type. So without type, or another supportive language, I may interpret my difficulties solely as deficiencies. Without type, I may assume that my only option is to change who I am, to change how I behave, to change how I am in the world. With type, this gift to us from Katherine Briggs and Isabel Briggs Myers, I have a framework that affirms the value of diversity. And with type, I have the opportunity to notice the opportunities that are offered by doing things differently, rather than focusing on how I might have to change. Next slide, please, Jerry.
So we have a quote from Brene Brown, and many of you know who she is, a wonderful researcher, sociologist. I'm a big fan of hers, and so is Katherine. Fitting in and belonging are not the same thing. In fact, fitting in is one of the greatest barriers to belonging. Fitting in is about assessing a situation and becoming who you need to be in order to be accepted. Belonging, on the other hand, doesn't require us to change who we are. It requires us to be who we are. And we feel like this dovetails nicely with the idea of psychological type and preference, because being who we are. It might be really hard in our environments from time to time, or it might have been hard in our family of origin. However, fitting in is about trying to be someone you're not, which sometimes is valid. For brief periods of time, it's the right thing to do. But on a day-to-day basis, it is so draining and exhausting. And like many of you, I hope to be an ambassador to encourage others that they can find ways to be themselves more often. Next slide, please.
How can type contribute to building belonging? Well, as Angelina and Gareth and Rob were talking about in the last session, type is a powerful tool for self-awareness. And when people get a chance to really apply it, to get to a place of self-acceptance and perhaps even self-compassion. In addition, type can help us to understand the mismatch between others' assumptions, familial, social, cultural, about how people are supposed to behave, and our own sense of the natural and authentic way to be. That is, type can give us some tools to see that this mismatch is not something we should try to cope with by changing to fit in, but instead to find a way in which we can be the natural and authentic self, and hopefully give us that language to explain how others' assumptions at each of these levels may be making it difficult, and help them to see the brilliance that comes with being who we really are, as opposed to us trying to become who they'd like us to be. In addition, type can offer us information. It can reveal how different aspects of the self can be called upon to help master challenging situations and allow us to thrive in the way that Rob talked about balance. When we're aware, as I would be, of preferences for introversion, intuition, thinking, and perceiving, that there are going to be people who see the world through the lens of extroversion, sensing, feeling, and judging, I can find ways to draw on those aspects in challenging situations, and also to use my own home-based preferences to help me to build a way forward that will make drawing on those non-preferred aspects that little more practice and skill. And finally, knowing about the polarities at the preference level, at the 8 function level, and even, as we'll hear from Sterling Bates in a keynote tomorrow, looking at dimensions within temperaments or essential motivators, sometimes called, essential motivators, another name for temperaments, and interaction styles. There are other ways we can look to flex and grow using this amazing model that is type.
So we want you all to think about what values drive your sense of belonging. And before we move to our first exercise, and we change the slide, Katherine, I want to remind you that this is sort of a taste or the beginning of a process. And some of you will feel like, wow, I could spend a whole day talking about this. And you absolutely could. You could spend, weeks thinking about this. But we want you to just get a sense of what you could do to enrich your own learning, or what you might want to try with clients or loved ones. So we understand that some of you will feel like, I just kind of got started, and that frustration is real, but we think it's more important for you to get a taste. So just keep that in mind. Thank you. Next slide.
So we're going to start you off And for those of you who either downloaded the handout that Jerry so carefully put for us in the chat or have downloaded it previously, this is the guiding principles, values, activity. So we'll show you those principles in just a moment, but they are listed on the handout. And we'd like you to select which of the 3 guiding principles or values are so central to your identity that if they were absent, would cause you to feel that you didn't belong on a team, in a group, a work environment, or an organization. And we included the word group here specifically to encompass other situations in your personal life outside of the professional environment. Now,
Yeah.
the list on the next page, sorry.
A group could be a family or a group of friends. It doesn't have to be, as Katherine said, a professional environment.
Or if someone's a student, it could be the group that they're working with to get a project done, or classmates in some other fashion. So we started out with a short list so it would fit on the next slide. And you should feel free, if something very core for you is not on this list, to add that to your own list.
Yeah, this is
Elizabeth,
just.
could you read these for us?
Sure. And as Katherine was saying, this is just a starting off point. This is not, these are not your sole choices. We just wanted to jumpstart your thinking. So use these if you like, or don't use them at all. But 3 core principles or values. So the ones we have on the list are authenticity, excellence, energy, authority, drive, curiosity, compassion, accuracy, learning culture, respect, freedom, edginess, practicality, stability, efficiency, welcoming atmosphere. And I am having trouble seeing the bottom, but and this
is when you've made your selection, record your 3 choices and your 4-letter type in the chat. And so we'll just pause here to give people a chance. And I saw that someone had already put their information in the chat. And then we're going to send you out to some breakout rooms in just a minute, so that you'll have a chance to talk with a partner about the core principles or values that you chose. And why they're important to you, what makes them so central to your identity, and how their absence would diminish your sense of belonging.
And Jerry and Katherine, can you help me remember, will they be able to see the next slide while they're in their groups?
No.
They will not. So what I would suggest is, if you don't have the handout, when we come up to the next slide, that you take a picture with a device you have with you to keep track of it. And that should enable you at least to see that. And Jerry, I do not know how many people we have in the session.
We have 15, including you and me and Elizabeth. So that will be 6 pairs then. Would you like me to put people into breakout rooms now, or not yet?
I think if you could bring up the next slide so that people have a sense of what they're going to be looking at.
Sure.
In their breakouts. And we'll just talk this through quickly so we'd like you to introduce yourself and share the 3 principles or values you chose, and then take turns discussing how you think these reflect your type. And we will give you a warning at the halfway point to let you know in your groups that you would like to swap over. And you'll have 7 minutes in total to be in discussion with each other. And as Elizabeth said, this will probably feel a little bit tough to say as much as you'd like to say. However, it'll give us some chance to come back and share as a larger group. So while you're in your breakout rooms, in addition to reflecting on your type, if you could share with your partner what makes these principles important to you, how they're central to your identity. If you've chosen a work context, perhaps it's your identity at work. If you've chosen another context, perhaps how central they are to your identity as a member of that group. And finally, how the absence of these in a situation or in a group would diminish your sense of belonging. So take a few notes on your partner's choices, reflect a bit on how they're similar or different from your own. And when we come back together, we'd love to hear your ahas about belonging from your discussion when we're back in the larger group. So Jerry, I think if you could send people off, that would be...
Oh, sorry, I think I've just managed to come out of that session. Can you pop me back in?
It's fine. We're closing the rooms anyway.
Oh, you're closing them.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
right.
that's fine. That's why
Yeah.
we probably bumped you out.
I was very, very fast there.
Can you bring us back to the non-slide view so that we can see each other in slightly larger frames?
Sure. Yeah. Everybody's rejoining here. Welcome back. I think everyone's here now.
Wonderful.
Welcome.
And
One of the things that intrigued me was the near consistency of two items in terms of how important they seem to be to this group. And it does fit given what I know of the preferences of people in this group. So we had 5 people for authenticity and 5 people talking about compassion as the values that they felt if they weren't present, they couldn't do without. And I was hoping that at least one person who chose each of those could share a little bit about what they discussed in their group and also tell us a little bit about why that was so important. Let's start with authenticity.
Yeah, I put authenticity as an INFJ. And I also put compassion. And yeah, I was saying to my group, they just stood out to me as being 2 of the most important, along with respect as well. So respect was my 3rd one. But I just felt, yeah, for me, maybe because I'm in NF, I think just above everything else, those are the core values that I have, and everything else is like a nice extra to have. So the excellence, the drive, the freedom, the curiosity, the learning, all of that is really important. But I think without compassion and being able to be yourself, the rest is not as meaningful to me.
Thanks, Rowan.
Yeah, I put those as well, because I think as an INFP in the workplace, which I left quite a long time ago, but I felt very much I had to fit in with other people's ways of being, and I wondered how authentic they were being, to be honest. But you can't function, you can't give your best unless you can be yourself, and yet you can be required to simply fit in like a cog, you know. And also compassion. You know, there's so much bullying now in the workplace and in politics. It's all we hear about in this country. And I certainly recognized it where I worked, and realizing that people have different and difficult lives and probably are trying to do their best, I think is really important. and not damning them for, little things which can happen.
Valerie, I
Yvonne.
fully concur. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry,
No.
Marky, I just saw your hand go up. So compassion as well, authenticity as well. And with ENFJ preferences, I did throw in efficiency. So that does matter too. But Mary and I had a nice conversation on this as well. And compassion was very important to me in the same reason it is for you, Valerie, where we don't know what's going on in people's lives. And they may come out attacking us when it's really not about us at all. And it's just, I find if we can, and I think a lot of this, I use type throughout my life as well, but it's really about being able to kind of take yourself out of the situation and understand where they're coming from. And, and I really value realness, letting people be who they are is so important. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Graham and I had an interesting conversation about the word authenticity. I didn't actually choose it in my words, but to me, if there's some of the others are present, then I should sort of expect it, that authenticity would be part of that. And we also, we talked about that authenticity is defined so differently by all of us. All of these words, really, there's a whole, there's a whole discussion about each one of these, and so it was hard really to choose the words and then just have those be the words without a whole lot more. Well, this is what I mean by it. And for me, curiosity, I put instead of compassion, because if I'm curious about people, I'm probably slowing down, I'm listening, I'm paying attention to what is going on for them. So I guess I had some assumptions built into some of my words, and I just it's complex to really choose those words and then have them be understood by others.
I think
One of
that's
the things,
great.
Elizabeth, and I really
Go
love
ahead. Go ahead,
about
Katherine.
giving people a list. Oh, go ahead, Elizabeth.
Well, I was just going to agree with Marky, and I also appreciate everyone else's comments that definitions are different depending on the person. Absolutely. So that's part of our challenge with language. And later in the session, we're going to do something that's a little, we have to rely on language to communicate with each other and express ideas, but it's a little less language focused. But I agree with you on that. Everyone has their own interpretation that has some similarities and probably some important differences as well. But go ahead, Katherine, go ahead.
Well, first I want to say, Mary, thanks for sharing Virginia Satir's words meanings are in people, not in words. And Katherine, for sharing Humpty Dumpty, words mean whatever you want them to mean. And I think both of those are very true. And it was actually part of our motivation for giving you a list of words beforehand to hopefully unlock some of the sense that people choose often the same things, but have very different motivations for those choices. And in doing group sessions, one of the things you can uncover in the groups is, as Marky was saying, what the assumptions are about what those words mean. And oftentimes when we agree with each other, we don't take a lot of time to slow down and unpack what those assumptions are. And that agreement may not be something that's actually very true. And a lot of the work on psychological safety suggests that if people don't feel safe to share what their true thoughts are or to speak up, they may agree to get along and go along, and that ends up hampering their belonging, because that agreement is not based on something that, as all of you have identified as important, authenticity. So there were also some items that were added: autonomy, connection, and creativity. And I was hoping that one of the people who added something to our list could just tell us a little bit about what stood out for them about that particular word that they chose.
I'm happy to start. I saw the word freedom, but that doesn't sound like the right word. It's in the right direction, but it's not the right word. It sounds a little bit too, I don't know, self-centered almost somehow. So I replaced it with autonomy, and I guess independence could have been another version. Fundamental to me is I need to be free to do what I think is the right thing to do and not constrained. So if somebody takes away my freedom by telling me what to do, rather than allowing me to use my knowledge, creativity, everything that I bring to the party today based on everything I've ever learned or experienced, then I would feel like I'm in a total straitjacket. I would feel like I couldn't operate. I couldn't bring the real me to bear. I couldn't bring my competence to bear on the situation. And I would be totally disabled in all my capabilities, and the value that I have to add would somehow be lost. So it's such an important word for me, that this, autonomy to do things the way I believe they have to be done in order to have the most impact in the situation, whether for myself or whether for others.
Thank you, Shirley. Sarah, I think you had an additional word. Could you tell us a little bit about why you selected connection?
Yes, I was in a group with Katherine, and we were just saying that the words that we've used are kind of fit in with our type, really. So as someone who has preferences for ESFJ, it is, in order for me to really feel that I belong, and is absolutely a guiding principle and a value, is to establish a connection with somebody I'm talking to or I'm working with or interacting with, and thinking about kind of family connections, them being kind of current and warm and real and now. So to me, it's absolutely my kind of number one value.
Thank you, Sarah. And I see that your partner, Katherine, has her hand up.
I do, yes. And thanks, Katherine. Yeah, I just wanted to make a quick comment. I actually started in a group with Rowan and Shirley, and I got whipped out and parachuted
we
into
missed
Sarah. So apologies, Rowan and Shirley, that I got whipped out. But we were just commenting. Rowan had just talked about her values, and we were just commenting in that group that what I could hear was sort of, to me, catalyst NF values coming through from what Rowan said. Anyway, since being, coming out of that group, I had a quick look in the chat to see what the other NTs in the room, Graham, Shirley and myself, had put. And the one word the three of us all had in common was excellence.
Mm.
So yeah, I just wanted to make that point, really, that there's something there for people with the, the theorist temperament about excellence, doing things well, wanting to be good at things ourselves, and that sort of thing. And that's really important to us. And I think if you're working in an organization where you think the standards are not good enough and people aren't performing well enough, you don't feel that you quite belong there. That's how I feel anyway.
Totally agree with you. I think the biggest insult that anyone could ever say to me of all the words is incompetent. If somebody said, "Surely you're incompetent," I would be completely floored. I would be absolutely, just competence is so important to me. And, having almost earned the right to be competent and be able to then speak about something, and deliver excellence, that's absolutely fundamental. And without that, I would just do nothing, say nothing.
Yeah. And it also becomes a problem for me because I immediately get defensive. If I think that I'm being blamed for something that actually is down to somebody else, I'm immediately defensive, which I need to learn to manage better.
I would normally push blame and shame back, as I don't do blame and shame is what I normally say. So, I mean, yeah, I guess defense shields are defense shields, aren't they? So, I would question myself as to why am I feeling attacked right now, and how to push that back and reframe that in some way. But no, I see what you're saying.
Gosh, anybody think you're an NT, Shirley, saying about incompetence?
I am most definitely an NT through and through. You cut me in half.
Because one thing Marky and I talked about, the word I added was integrity. Because for me...
Oh, I'm sorry, Graham. I had that up at the top of my page and I forgot to
Yeah,
read
well,
it
I'll only be very offended, Catherine. It was just that there's something that's been very important for me throughout my practice of Myers-Briggs, is about being integrated. It's integrating self. I mean, I tie it in with authenticity very well, but Marky and I sort of concluded that the words that she'd chosen were heart words and the words I'd chosen were head words. Surprise, surprise.
Interesting, yeah.
But integrity, there's a whole field of meaning to integrity. But one of the important things for me about understanding ourselves through the Jungian typology is actually integrating both our preferred and non-preferred functions. And it's a lifetime's journey, probably more.
I think that's really interesting because, when I'm working with clients, particularly in a coaching situation, I always warn them up front that I'm dead honest, that I'm never going to lie to them. Everything I say is going to be, tailored to the situation, the extent to the level at which, and I normally ask them to choose. I make an anatomy with eggs. How do I like the eggs? Soft-boiled, medium-boiled, or hard-boiled, so that they can actually choose the type of language I'm going to use to give that feedback. But it's always going to be based in honesty and integrity. So actually, I think I would even consider switching one of my words to that word. Now you said it, it's just, yeah.
Well, and I would like to say that what's so great about these discussions is that we aren't stereotypes of our preferences, and that there are places where we have a lot in common and places where we don't, but it's not necessarily that someone with a feeling preference would choose a stereotypical feeling value, although I'm sure feeling would come into play of why she or he or they picked it. And so I think it's really interesting how there are commonalities, but the way we come about it, and getting back to this whole definitions thing, how do we define things, is very interesting and really important with clients to unpack why they've chosen something.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, a lot of
or
my
loved
work...
ones, or loved ones. It doesn't have to be clients.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because, I mean, exactly back to integrity. I have 4 children and they all know that I only lose my temper. I don't even lose my temper. It's worse than that, much worse than that, is if they lie to me. And the smaller the lie, the more I lose my temper, because I always say, you lie on little things, how can I possibly ever trust you on the big things? So this whole thing about integrity is so fundamental to trust, which is therefore totally fundamental to relationships. To me, often it seems it's all tied together. It's not either or. Those relationships are crucial to me, but they're based on trust, which is based on integrity. So it's almost like quite a complex system underneath, a single word. We might be using different words, but actually meaning the same behaviors, or may have the same root for why we are choosing a particular word, although it's not necessarily going to be the same word that we're choosing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, thank you for so much richness, and to remind you of what Elizabeth said at the start, that this was going to feel like it was just a taster of how important our values are around our feelings of belonging and our feelings of authenticity, identity, and self. So to move out of words for a bit, we'd like to show you one quote and then try a much less word-based, although we'll have to communicate it with words, activity. Jerry, could you go back to sharing the slides for us? So making the conscious effort to consider what genuinely matters interrupts the unconscious default pattern of looking to others to gauge how much we value ourselves. So this quote really asks you to think about what it is that you're doing when you compare or you look outside first, rather than looking inside to see with integrity and authenticity what's going to be genuinely important and valuable to you.
And it also helps if you, because of your circumstances, are in an environment where your preferences tend to be quite different or not valued. And we can then think we are wrong. So looking at ourselves and valuing ourselves regardless of circumstances, as hard as that can be, is very important.
And Jane just commented that both integrity and authenticity are part of the Life Keys value set, because those with the preference for thinking chose integrity, and those with the preference for feeling chose authenticity. So we will move on to our next activity. As much as I hate to cut off the great discussion, and ask you to think about what environments feed your sense of belonging. Next slide.
Okay, what we'd like you to do is to imagine your ideal environment. And I'm just trying to move, there we go. Imagine an ideal environment or situation that when you step into it, you feel an instant sense of belonging. What are the cues in this ideal place, space, or time that tell you that your values or principles will be held sacred? And we have a bunch of questions for you to consider. You do not by any means have to answer each specific question. They're to get your mind thinking. So imagine who else, if anyone, is there. You might be by yourself in your ideal environment, or you might be with one or two others, or you might be with a lot of people. What objects might be present, what activities are taking place, or what might be possible there. Where are you and what are the physical surroundings like? Is it a particular time of day or season of the year? What can you hear, smell, taste, and touch? And anything else that seems significant or symbolic? And Katherine, do you want to add anything to that?
Can you back up, Jerry? I was just going to say, what we'd like you to do is just take a couple of minutes on your own to think about this, and then we'll reconvene as a larger group to share our thoughts. Jerry, could you just leave the slide up while we're all thinking? Oop. you one more minute. Jerry, could you bring us into the large group? I'm noticing there are a couple of people that we have not heard from. And one of them I can see down there is my buddy Renee. And I'm wondering, Renee, would you feel comfortable sharing a little bit about your ideal environment with us?
I just like to say I'm driving, so
Okay.
not being able to do a lot to prepare in writing. I will switch off the camera again. Always good to see you, Katherine. And sorry I missed some of the presentation as well. I got disconnected during the journey. For me, there needs to be a high level of trust. I've seen I don't operate well when there's no trust. It's funny because looking at the words, there were negative definitions coming to me, like there should be no competition, but collaboration, for instance. No hidden agendas either. And it doesn't mean necessarily everything is out in the open, because I think, especially for us introverts and with a feeling preference, if we don't feel safe enough, we may not reveal everything about ourselves. But that doesn't mean necessarily that it's a hidden agenda. So I make a difference between the two. There needs to be space for oneself, but it cannot be just that, because my purpose in life is to help make life better for other people. And if there's nobody around, what do I do? So it's, but it cannot be always. I love running MBTI events with people, but at the end of the day, I'm exhausted. So I need a space for myself as well. So I hope you could hear me well enough, because for me, it's cutting out every now and then, but I will leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. Is there anyone else who has not had a chance to speak who would like to share something about their ideal environment with us?
Mary's got her hand up.
Mary?
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. My ideal environment really very quickly is something that I'm experiencing now. I had to do it. I moved to Southern California a couple of years ago from Seattle, and wasn't able to find a community down here with COVID and everything going on. But I did find a wonderful ideal environment where I go to work out, which is in an exercise program called Gyrotonic. It's like gin and tonic, only it's gyrotonic. And I had practiced it in Seattle, and I had been in a beautiful studio with somebody who was a dancer, and all of, paintings on the wall, anti-gym, complete anti-gym environment. And I came down here and I thought, what are the chances I'm going to find a place down here? And I did. It was the same thing, owned by a dancer, beautiful paintings on the wall, beautiful equipment, crafted beautifully, lots of space in the room. And I wrote down these words. What characteristics does it have that lead you to say I belong here? The people there are compassionate, they're competent, they're confident, and they're connected to you. So I feel completely seen, understood, and I feel safe.
That's beautiful.
It's a beautiful place.
Anyone else want to share like Mary has?
Well, I'm happy to share, but I don't want to dominate. I think the word that I like that Rene used was collaborative. I actually work at the moment, part of the time I'm working with a client in Berlin, which is the AI campus. And there's lots of startup companies there. And I love this sort of collaborative ecosystem that they've got, where almost people are sharing their brains. We share quite a lot of meals, which is also really nice, and an opportunity to connect on an intellectual level, but also on a personal level. There are lots of different types of rooms, small rooms, large rooms, even small booths where you can be alone. There are large spaces where you can sit with, however many people. There are lots of different spaces that look and feel different. Different colors are being used, different amount of lights, different seating arrangements, and so on. Places where you can hide away almost. Places where you're very visible and can easily get into discussions with others, which is absolutely, totally brilliant, because depending on your mood, you need a certain type of space. If I want to work and do analytics, I need to be on my own and working completely quietly and independently. If I want to bounce ideas around, I need to be in a group where I've got creative minds. I need the interaction with others to get my creative brain actually working as a extroverted intuitive. And lots of plants, lots of lights, the smell of coffee, just the idea that people are all trying to be creative, innovative, bring their best minds to some of the toughest problems, to try and make a difference. And even that shared sense of purpose is amazing. So I go in there often quite early in the morning for startup companies. Most of them are crawling in around 10 o'clock. I go in really early, and often I come out really late, and I'm just buzzing. I'm just feel, wow, that was a really amazing day. And I get paid for it as well, which is, the upside. But yeah, that would be as close to my ideal as I've ever come, to be honest.
That sounds like an amazing situation, Shirley. That sounds wonderful. I know we're getting very close to the time here. This is something that Katherine and I have done with other groups in the past, and it often is a nice change because it's a little less intellectual. And sometimes people get really into the touch, smell, sense of whatever they be experiencing, which you talked about a little bit, Shirley, in your real life experience. Some people talk about a real life experience. Some people just imagine something out of the blue, but it kind of gets people out of their heads, and that can be sort of restorative, and also help people figure out why things are important if they look at sort of the structures and the how. And then Katherine, I'll toss it over to you.
Well, what we are thinking to close is to send you off to the activity on the last page of the handout, which is now your homework instead of our in-session experience, which is to think about action steps that you might take to bring greater alignment between your values, your self, and your environment, in the hopes that that's going to both orient you in a way that increases your sense of belonging and gives others space to become more who they are. So I like to end sessions by having people congratulate themselves on a job well done. So could all of you raise your right hand? And please give yourself a pat on the back for your hard work and collaboration here today. And we're willing to stay a little bit after the half hour in order to continue the conversation. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
you. Thank you
Great.
very much to Katherine and Elizabeth for all your hard work and preparation, and for the sensitive way you've guided us through this. So thank you so much. I'm going to stop the recording now, but do stay around if you have things that you'd like to share or to ask.